Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea again reports a new daily high in terms of coronavirus infections. The authorities are raising distancing to the highest level, and President Moon will be holding a special meeting with top officials next Monday. South Korea will be speeding up its vaccine campaign next week, giving doses to more military service members and especially students and teachers. And Japan has finally decided that there will be no spectators allowed at the Olympics in Tokyo at all, declaring a state of emergency that will last for the duration of the Games. It's 5:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea on Friday reported its highest number of new COVID-19 cases in the pandemic so far at 1,316. The authorities say we're now well into a fourth wave of infections. The capital region will be put under the highest level of distancing, level 4, starting next Monday. They're also ramping up testing. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
For the second day in a row, South Korea reported a record-breaking number of new infections with 1,316 new COVID-19 cases reported on Friday. But authorities say that it's possible that this figure could be beaten yet again.
A fourth wave of infections is happening right now, and there could be more cases than in the other waves. Just today, we saw more cases than yesterday.
Seoul and its surrounding areas continue to account for the majority of local infections with 963. The recent outbreak at a large department store in Seoul's Gangnam-gu district has now been linked to more than 90 cases. A series of cluster infections at several English cram schools in Gyeonggi-do province, which spilled over into the capital, continue to add confirmed cases. And dozens of cases are now linked to an acting class. Following the spike, nation's capital is ramping up its testing capacity. Here at Seoul Plaza, a makeshift COVID-19 testing center opened again on Friday, 5 months after it had closed following a fall in the spread of the virus. This center is able to test up to 1,200 people per day. There will be twice as many testing centers available starting from Monday, with 52 of them scattered around Seoul. Hours vary by center, but makeshift centers will open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on weekends.
All citizens should cancel all non-essential plans, and we ask that you try to stay at home as much as possible to be safe. Also, if there is even a small sign that symptoms have begun to show, please go and get tested right away.
While the capital region has tightened restrictions and is trying to fight the virus as the nation's epicenter, there is a slight drop in percentage compared to other regions of the country. This is not because the virus is being curbed, but rather there is a continued rise in the number of cases from other regions as well. The southeastern port city of Busan had the most outside of the capital with 53 cases. A similar number of new cases were reported in Chungcheongnam-do province, where there has been a cluster infection at the Korea Army Training Center. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And President Moon Jae-in will chair a meeting next Monday to review the COVID-19 situation in Seoul and the surrounding area. He ordered officials to convene the session amid the spike in infections in and around the capital. Moon will be joined by the mayors of Seoul and Incheon, the governor of Gyeonggi-do province, the prime minister, the health and interior ministers, as well as the head of the KDCA. The Blue House said they'll be reviewing the country's quarantine and prevention measures to get the situation under control. South Korea's vaccine campaign will be ramping up next week, with first doses to be given to more people among the general public. A third batch of Moderna's vaccine, which arrived Thursday, will be given to people in their late 50s, starting toward the end of the month. Jaein reports.
With a spiraling number of COVID-19 cases, the South Korean government is set to level up the speed of its vaccination drive through the third quarter. Starting Monday, some 70,000 military personnel and conscripts will be receiving their first Pfizer shots. From Tuesday, local governments in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province will enforce autonomous vaccinations. They will be selected through a separate plan, with Seoul allocating 200,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine and Gyeonggi-do province 140,000. Both regions are planning to give priority to people who frequently come into contact with others, like those working in private academies, the transportation industry, and delivery services. 380,000 teachers and care workers at daycare centers, kindergartens, and elementary schools will be getting the Pfizer vaccine from Tuesday as well, 2 weeks earlier than scheduled. 640,000 high school seniors and faculty staff are also due to be administered from July 19th. Starting at the end of July, those in their late 50s will be getting Moderna shots. This comes as South Korea received a third batch of Moderna vaccines on Thursday, adding 354,000 more doses. To date, more than 15.5 million people, or some 30.2% of the population, have received first shots. 11% of South Korea's population has been fully vaccinated. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korea is known for its prowess in making robots for industry and for the service sector. There are some robots developed in other countries, too, that'll be hitting the market soon. Some to help out senior citizens and others to be put in the sea to clean up trash. Jaein reports.
This is Grace. She's a humanoid robot built to help the elderly and those isolated since the COVID-19 pandemic. Created by the Hong Kong team of Hanson Robotics, Grace can measure your temperature with a thermal camera and speak to you in English, Mandarin, and Cantonese.
I can do all kinds of things for elderly people. I can visit with people and brighten their day with social stimulation, entertain and help guide exercise, but also can do talk therapy, take bio readings and help healthcare providers assess their health and deliver treatments.
But Grace's biggest feature is that she can express emotions. Founder David Hansen said Grace has 48 major facial muscles that enable her to make different facial expressions.
Hey Grace, why don't you look at my face, thank you, and I'm going to show you a smile, and let's see what your smile looks like. Okay, yeah, look, or sad. Oh yes, reacting a little sad if I feel pain, and then maybe like imagine a big loud noise happens, bam! So.
This facilitates trust and engages users to feel as if they're interacting with humans. Grace is set to be fully deployed in parts of Asia by next year. The demand has been rising for robots that can help humans. That's why Nicholas Carlesi created the Jellyfish Bot. The Jellyfish Bot eats trash in the sea. It's a robotic sea cleaning boat that sucks plastic bags, empty bottles, and surgical masks from the water. Around the size of a suitcase, this robotic boat can even pick up trash from the narrow spaces cleaners with nets cannot reach.
I've always seen manual methods, people carrying nets to collect trash, and I've told myself I have a doctorate in underwater robotics. And when I finished my doctorate, I thought, why not make this quite tedious and thankless work of collecting trash easier?
The Jellyfish Bot can go anywhere, making not only the earth greener, but also the lives of cleaners much easier. 신예은, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
Well, there are concerns about the potential economic impact of the Delta variant of COVID-19, and that seems to be part of what sent stocks lower overnight in New York. All three main indices down about 0.7, 0.8%. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, if you look at the U.S. market, it has fallen quite significantly during the day. Did recover slightly back, but nevertheless, it was quite weak day. Dow fell by 0.75%. S&P 500 lost 0.86%, and also Nasdaq was down by 0.7%. Right now, people are concerned about this COVID-19 variant and also U.S. economic growth rate picking, and that means that the overall earnings might be picking as well, and that's why people are concerned about the U.S. economic condition as well as global economic conditions, and that has resulted into sell-off of the selling of net buying of the bonds, resulting into the 10-year government bond rate falling sharply to 1.28% or so. Even though today it is coming up a little bit to about 1.33% or so, but nevertheless, it is one of the lowest number that we have seen in a very long period of time. Because U.S. market have been continued to be going up and continue to be breaking the recent records, but I guess now investors are worried about the recent growth peaking in U.S. and that on the abroad, obviously the new COVID variant might hurt the global economic outlook. However, though, we think that this is not going to be lasting for a very, very long time. That the correction might be a short-term correction as the economy continues to continue to show recovering phase as far as the U.S. as well as global are concerned.
And much the same story today here in Korea. Stocks down by quite a bit, in particular because of the stronger distancing rules to take effect because of the virus. The Kospi down to around 3,200 points and not many exceptions to the declines today. Tell us about the domestic market.
Right. If you look at the beginning of the market, Kospi actually plunged as much as 1.8%. But did recover, but nevertheless, still it fell by about 1%. The Kosdaq is also down by 0.54%, but it actually did better than the Kospi. Main reason for this kind of correction is because foreign investors are the major seller of the Korean market. They net sold about 1.3 trillion won worth of Korean equities, and also the institution continues to be seller as well by about 500 billion or so. Only the retail investors are the one that bought about 1.8 trillion won worth of Korean equities. If you look at the economic condition with the concern about the COVID-19 variant, the toughest social distancing rule of level 4 has been administered, which means that would result into quite weak domestic consumption numbers. Obviously, the more than 2 people gathering is not going to be allowed. That means that it will be negative news for the mom and pop shop as well as restaurants and etc. So this is the key concern about Korean retail investors as well as the Korean equity market. If you look at the government bond rate as well for Korea, it has fallen to low as about 2%, while the U.S. rates actually fell down to about 1.285. So all in all, this is the key risk at the current point in time that maybe the COVID new variant might affect the global economic growth rate as well as Korea's economic growth rate to be slowed down. And that means that the earnings might be peaking as well for the second quarter, and then going to the third quarter might be weaker than expected. So all in all, this is affecting not just Korea, but I guess on the global scale.
Right, and as we look at the exchange rate, it's risen quite a bit this week. The Korean won now at almost 11.50 to the dollar, and that's in the upper range of what we've been discussing recently. Is this simply the coronavirus situation in Korea, or what do you see happening with the exchange rate?
Right, I think it's just the sentiment that is affecting the currency. If you look at the Korea's current account surplus, it continues to widen to 10.76 billion in May. Which is one of the strongest number. And if that's the case, then not just the current account, but trade surplus continues to be very strong as well. So all in all, the only concern about the Korean won is because the consumer debt level is high for Korea. But with this COVID-19, I think that consumer debt level is not going to be the major issue per se. But I think obviously the sentiment is affecting negatively that if you look at the U.S. dollars, has strengthened, and that resulted into the weaker Korean won versus U.S. dollars. But however, though, the fundamental-wise, there's no reason for Korean won to depreciate further. As you said, it is at the upper end of the trading range per se. It is now at as high as 11.50 level. In the past, when there was a big concern about Korea, it did go up to 1,200 plus. I think the peak was around 1,220 or 1,230 or so in the past. So I think that people might be thinking that it might happen to that kind of level. However, though, after the COVID-19, if you look at the overall economic growth rate, Korea is one of the better ones relative to any others, along with the U.S. So therefore, we think that the currency should be stabilizing, and that means that the Korean equity market would be also stabilizing as well. Only concern that we saw in the short term was because foreign investor net selling coming through that results into the currency depreciation. But we don't think that that will last long on the basis of fundamentals.
Well, now the big cryptocurrencies are a little lower this week. Of course, it was earlier this year that they took the big fall, but right now Bitcoin is at about $33,000, maybe a little under that. Ethereum back down to around 2,100, and there continues to be news, of course, about more regulations on crypto. What's the story in crypto right now?
Right. I think earlier we talked about how U.S. government bond rate has fallen to 1.3% below. Obviously, that means that the asset for the riskier asset demand is actually have weakened quite significantly. The safe asset, obviously, government bond is in favor. Obviously, that resulted into Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other type of cryptocurrencies showing a quite sharp drop. Right now, Bitcoin remain at about 33,000 level. Which is half of what it was to be the peak at the beginning of this year. We think that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency would be in a range bound because it's still, if you add all the cryptocurrency value, from the beginning of this year to now, it has risen by more than 80% YOY, year to date. So clearly that means that still people were in favor of the cryptocurrencies. However, if you look at the cryptocurrency as a part of the alternative asset, and when we say alternative asset, it includes gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies, the total size of that market or the market capitalization of these three major alternative assets actually hasn't really changed much other than cryptocurrency rising quite a bit, which means that we think that the value of these alternative assets should further rise in the future because if you look at the M1 growth rate of the U.S., it did go up by about 7.8% year to date, and also it's up by 18% year on year. So, which means that the value of the currency has dropped, and therefore the value of alternative assets and alternative currency should increase. So that's why we think that the cryptocurrency as well as the silver value and maybe even gold might be showing a rising trend going forward. Yesterday, we did see some correction. However, though, we think that it should stabilize with the abundant liquidity that we're seeing. And on the longer term, however, though, it might take much longer time for the cryptocurrency to further rise because we still have a quite significant level of the regulatory environment where the U.S. government as well as Chinese government are tackling this quite aggressively, that it might be just part of the alternative asset, but it will never substitute the overall currency. So all in all, trend might be stabilizing, but nevertheless, in terms of the interest towards the cryptocurrency, it's much less than what it used to be.
It does seem that way. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thank you for sharing your insights with us as always, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
With the Games just a fortnight away, it's been announced that the Tokyo Olympics will take place without any spectators at all. The organizers made the decision Thursday, saying there was no other option as a resurgence in COVID-19 cases forced Japan to declare a state of emergency in Tokyo. Lee Sung-jae reports.
The 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games, already postponed once due to the pandemic, will start in a couple of weeks' time, but will do so without any fans as a recent surge in virus cases forced Japan to declare another state of emergency in the capital that will run throughout the duration of the Games.
We wanted to have full stadiums so that people from the community could get involved in welcoming athletes so that we can have the full presentation of the power of sports. However, we are now faced with rising COVID-19 infections, so we unfortunately have no other choice but to hold the Games in a limited way.
The announcement was also made by Japan's Olympic minister, who said the decision was reached after a meeting between the International Olympic Committee, the International Paralympic Committee, the organizing committee, as well as the Tokyo and the central Japanese government. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga stressed the importance of the decision, saying it was essential to prevent Tokyo being slammed by the highly contagious Delta variant. People will also be asked not to gather for events on public roads, including the marathon and the triathlon. However, officials say some venues outside the greater Tokyo metropolitan area will allow a small number of spectators. With the declaration, U.S. First Lady Joe Biden's team is assessing whether it's still feasible for her to attend as part of the U.S. delegation. The announcement comes as the East Wing said in June that they have been in discussions about having Mrs. Biden attend the opening ceremony. However, despite the resurgence of cases in the Japanese capital, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters Thursday that the White House fully supports American athletes traveling to Tokyo to compete. While Japan has not seen an explosive COVID-19 outbreak like many other countries, it's inching closer to 1 million cases and nearly 15,000 deaths. On top of that, a slow vaccine rollout means only a quarter of Japan's population has had at least one vaccine shot. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has formed a group of experts to monitor Japan's planned release of contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Experts from 11 countries, including South Korea, are joining the group. Yoon Jung-min reports.
South Korean nuclear energy expert Kim Hong-seok from the Korea Institute of Nuclear Safety has been included in an international IAEA expert group that has been formed to verify the discharge of contaminated water from Japan's Fukushima nuclear power plant. Kim is currently serving as the South Korean representative to UN Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. Experts from a total of 11 countries, including the U.S., France, and China, are reportedly joining the monitoring group. In a readout on Friday, the Korean government said it was meaningful that a Korean nuclear expert is joining the group, adding it has secured a minimum safety catch. It said it will make greater efforts to ensure objective and substantive verification on the entire process. The government added it will tighten radioactive material monitoring in the surrounding seas and inspections of imported fishery products. South Korea had earlier expressed deep regrets over Japan's decision to dump contaminated Fukushima water into the ocean without enough consultation with its neighbors and has been demanding that Tokyo be more transparent. The International Atomic Energy Agency announced on Thursday that it has reached a deal with Japan on the scope of the technical assistance needed to monitor and review the plant release of what Tokyo calls treated water. Under the agreed terms, the UN watchdog will examine key safety elements of the discharge plan, including the radiological characterization of the water. Japan intends to start the release in about 2 years, and the entire operation could take decades. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in met Friday with 8 members of the U.S. Congress who are visiting as part of the U.S. Congressional Study Group on Korea. That group focuses on South Korea-U.S. relations. Meeting with the delegation at the Blue House, President Moon thanked them for supporting the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Take a listen.
한미 관계 발전을 든든히 후원해 준 미 의회 역할에 깊이 감사드리며 한미 동맹이 가장 모범적인 동맹으로 발전하고 또 한반도의 항구적인 평화를 이끌어갈 수 있도록 변함없는 관심과 지원을 당부드립니다.
The lawmakers thanked South Korea for aiding the U.S. in the early days of the pandemic. They also asked for Seoul's interest in helping 2 North Korean families being held in China after fleeing the North. They asked that the South Korean government contact China to try and secure their release. President Moon asked for the American lawmakers' support for increasing the number of visas issued to Koreans for special occupations. He pointed out that there are more than 50,000 Koreans studying in the U.S., but only 2,000 special occupation visas. The U.S. State Department says North Korea's malicious cyber activities threaten the U.S. and most of the world. Spokesperson Ned Price said financial institutions in particular are vulnerable to what he called cyber espionage. Yonhap News Agency reports that the U.S. has been trying to track North Korean entities suspected of stealing money from the international financial system. Price emphasized the need for global cooperation, saying it's vital for countries, network defenders, and the public to work together to tackle the threat. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.